Hi, we're glad you're here. And while we're waiting for everybody to come on in, we've got a question for you to answer in the chat room, actually two questions. So two-part. The question is, what religion are you, if any? So your religion, you can also say none if you want to. And then if you'd like to share, what church, synagogue, or mosque do you attend? Maybe the name and then the location in the chat. So again, the questions are, what religion are you, if any? And if you want to share, what is the name of the church, synagogue, or mosque that you attend? And we've got some answers coming in. And they are, let's see. I'm agnostic, Jewish by upbringing, agnostic and only culturally Jewish as an adult, United Church of Christ, Bob McDuff, Central Lutheran Church, Van Nuys, California, part of ELCA. Not sure what that means.
Evangelical Christian. It's Lutheran.
Lutheran. Okay, great. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Buddhist Haku Unji Zen Center in Tempe, Arizona, Episcopal Church in Carmichael, California, none, but I occasionally attend Unity churches, Lutheran, Pagan, Unitarian, Catholic, St. Margaret Mead Church, Cortez, Colorado. Anybody else on my team want to read some more of these?
Yeah, what'd you leave off? United Church of Christ, probably.
Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado. Another Barbara from Lutheran, Pagan, okay, Unitarian, Catholic, Agnostic, Christian, Park Hill Church in San Diego, Protestant, let's see, Neo-Pagan, Catholic. I'm a Christian, Lutheran. A lot of Lutherans tonight. Okay. I attend Church Alive, non-denominational church in Albuquerque, Reformation Lutheran Church, PCUSA. I wonder what that is. Oh, Presbyterian Church, Houston, Woodlawn Hills in St. Paul, Bethany, Reformed Church, Catholic, Christian, no denomination. I'm a Lutheran, ELCA, Quaker, Christian with Native American and African American beliefs, and no church. Okay. Evangelical upbringing, United Methodist, Cleveland, Ohio. Shout out to the Buckeye State. Okay. Christian Reunion, Evangelical follower of Jesus. Evangelical Protestant, Black Hawk Church, Evangelical Free Church, Atheists, All Souls, UU, Colorado. Unitarian. I was raised Catholic, but no longer. Okay. Wow. That's pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah.
And we've got a good size number of people here tonight. 72 participants so far.
Yeah. So anyway, what does evangelical mean? I know the answer already. In Greek. Anyone know?
Has to do with the good news.
Thank you. You won the prize. I'll mail it to you tomorrow. No, just joking.
Okay, Ivan, we're at 8:05. Would you like to get us started?
Sure thing. Welcome, everybody, and Happy New Year. This is the first film club event of the new year. My name is Ivan Kaisan. I've come from Honolulu, Hawaii. And joining me today are the fellow film club leaders, Donna Murphy, Ron McFarland, Molly Zeff, and Stephanie Zamora joining us as a moderator at this time. We're here to discuss the film Democracy and Faith Under Siege, responding to Christian nationalism. I trust everybody has already seen it, and we're here to discuss it. So during the discussion, if you'd like to speak, please raise your electronic hand with the button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll call on you. For now, please mute your microphone until we call on you. Now we'll be following some Braver Angels ground rules, which is we're here to understand others and to help others understand us. We're not here to convince anyone of our views. We're not here to convince anyone to change their mind. We're not here to win points. We'll all have a chance to explain what we think and why. And we will take turns and not interrupt others, listen to everyone, and open up space for quieter group members like me. Be respectful. Everybody okay with that?
Raise your hand.
All right.
All right.
We welcome your participation. However, due to the time limitations and this big crowd, we'll probably not get to everyone who wants to speak. So we do want to enable someone who hasn't already spoken to have that chance over someone who already has. We will ask you to please keep your remarks brief, say under 2 minutes. We may need to move on to the next question in the interest of time. Now, those are all the rules that we will be following. And here to begin with the first question is Molly.
Hi, welcome everybody. We like starting fairly broad, so I'm just going to open it up. And it is, first question, generally speaking, what did you think of the film? And more specifically, how do you feel the movement as described in the film will impact our society in general? And I'm going to drop that in the chat too. So go ahead and raise your hands whenever you're ready. What did you think of the film, and how did you feel the movement as described in the film will impact our society in general? I'm also a timekeeper for tonight, so I'm going to keep people at about 1.5 or 2 minutes per answer. Yeah, go for it, Peter. Go for it, Peter. I mean,
Thanks. I was grateful for the film. We've had a sign posted in our local church, Christians Against Christian Nationalism, and the Congregational Church in town is planning to hold an event. So it helped clarify for me a lot of what the discussion was about. I'm a Christian pastor, retired, and I tend to be more conservative. So I was concerned that the film, the context of it was, what can we do about this? And I would want to reframe the question. Thank you.
yeah, no, thank you. Well, now you've left me hanging. How would you reframe the question?
Who are the people, and how can I understand them better? These people that we've put in a category.
That was a beautiful and deep Braver Angels framing there. Thank you, Peter. All right, I don't see any hands raised, so I'm going to do a going once, going twice. Going once? Yeah, go for it, Scott. You're muted, good sir.
I got to do it at the bottom. Okay. Thank you. I was a little frustrated with the film. It was interesting. I loved the two pastors that were on there. I think that answering the question, what is a Christian nationalist, is pretty problematic, and more problematic than Mr. Whitehead, than what the impression that he gave. These categories, oh my gosh, I can't remember. Resistors, rejectors, resistors, accommodators, ambassadors. As an evangelical, I am vociferously opposed to theocracy or any kind of merging of church and state. And yet, if I answered the questions, I also believe that America was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. That would put me in like an accommodator or even ambassador category, according to some people. And so I think the whole definition is more nuanced than than how he presented it. So, and even the question, what is a Christian nation? Depending on what you mean by that, can be answered so many different ways. So I just think there's a lot more nuance required to understand the subject. And that's coming from a guy who is an independent church movement that used to be, I would say, in the 80s, a Christian nationalist movement, and we sort of self-corrected. I don't know anybody that thinks that way anymore. And I've been going to evangelical conservative churches all my life. So anyway, my 2 cents. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Scott. And now we're moving on to Nancy. Go for it, Nancy.
Okay. I liked the film. I thought it was interesting and pretty well done. I come from a family where, though I am on the far end of the not at all Christian nationalists, my other family members are. And to have it be detailed about, you know, their belief that people should be Christian in order to serve in public office, that this is a Christian country, and that if you don't like it, then you should leave. Pretty stark. And I participated in a counter rally last week. There were about 30 Christian nationalists who showed up in Huron, Ohio, and protested on the courthouse steps. And maybe about 25 of us were on the other side of the street. It was peaceful. There were no guns in evidence. There was no back and forth, you know, yelling or screaming. So that was good, that we basically just were there to present, to represent, and bear witness that we did not agree. The main speaker was a city councilman from Huron who was talking about having been at the Capitol, storming the Capitol on January 6th. And several people that were walking by wanted to know what was going on. And so we had a chance to kind of explain and educate that that's your councilman, and he was in Washington on January 6th. So it was a good event.
Wow, that's wild. Thanks for sharing. And Bill, you'll be our last one for this question.
Yeah, so going back to the question of what did you think about the film? I mean, got to give the film credit because it did what it said it was going to do. Christians against Christian nationalism. And so what we had was a moderator who felt that way. We had 2 religious leaders who felt that way, and we had the sociologist who felt that way. On the other hand, that was not very brave or angels, because we didn't have anybody up there who was in favor of Christian nationalism. I was very interested in what Scott Freeman had to say. I would have liked the film to talk more about what people like Scott Freeman were thinking.
That's a really valuable point. It was definitely slanted. There's absolutely no question. So we're going to move on to the next question. I'm putting this in the chat as well. What important details about Christian nationalism do you think were left out of the film and should have been included? So this is a question where we like to draw on anybody's prior knowledge about what you saw that was obviously missing and what you feel like, you know, really should have been added to create a fuller story here. I'm going to give people a moment to think, and then again, use the hand raising at the bottom. Go for it, Deborah.
Okay, yes, if you can hear me. Deborah and also my friend Taylor, we're both here today. And so I don't remember much of a discussion about the separation of church and state and how that can be taken in different contexts by different people. And so to be able to have a clear definition of that would be helpful. And I feel like that is really a simplified way of clarifying this issue. So I'll leave it at that. Oh, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. We flagged some difficulty with that as well in our discussions yesterday, planning this discussion. Yeah, go for it. Ben or Benjamin, either. Let me know what you prefer.
It doesn't matter. It's interchangeable wherever you feel like they're. Going back to the question just proposed, I was just thinking, kind of remind me of, shoot, this might have been almost 15 years ago, maybe 20. Anyway, this reminded me of the big movement of Passion of the Christ movie and how that kind of reverberated kind of Christian nationalism and I don't, my concern and worry is, will there be like another big movement, a big movie that kind of circulate through the churches and maybe start another kind of uprising? That's what I'm worried about.
I really appreciate that. That's really good insightful really insightful to be aware of the potential implications as well. And we'll get there later too. It looks like there are no other hands on this particular topic. So going once, Ron, go for it.
Well, my prior knowledge about Christian nationalism, I'll tell you, I identify as a Christian, but my prior knowledge was zilch until I got into the documentary, and then I also read a few books on it, And I agree with an earlier caller talking about the confusion with the survey questions, because as a person of color, and I would answer and say, yes, I would love to have America as a Christian nation, even though I know it's unconstitutional. I'll tell you that. It is unconstitutional. But the thing about some of what I discovered is a type of ideology that is hard to define. And it becomes, what happens is it merges between Christian beliefs and some of the political ideology of Christian nationalists, okay? And some proponents believe believe that the success and the identity of the country thing are closely linked to Christian values, but it isn't, okay? We can get, I'm sure there's the pastor or someone else could allude to that because we put Christ first as Christians, not country first, even though we are patriots and we are loyal to America. But that's one separation of it. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. And Ross and then Bill, you're on deck.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate your work and that of Braver Angels in general. Amanda Tyler, the moderator for the film, mentioned at one point that, as she saw it, Christian nationalists see themselves as doing God's work by imposing what they see as God's will. One thing I would have liked to see included in the film was, how do they arrive at that conclusion? Thank you.
Thank you. That's also an insightful point about God's work. Hopefully we'll return to that later too. And Bill, you are up, and Scott, you're on deck.
Yeah, this might be a little bit repetitious to what's already been said, but the question is what was left out of the film. People have already touched on the fact that the Constitution was left out of the film. There could have been a little bit more of a discussion about what the Constitution says about the separation of church and state. But another thing that was left out of the film is the Bible. These people are Christians. They're supposed to go by the Bible. And in fact, they're supposed to go by the teacher, Jesus. Jesus was apolitical. Jesus said, my kingdom is no part of this world. Jesus said, give Caesar's things to Caesar. Jesus was a Jew. He had basically no use for the Roman Empire. He was not involved in politics in any way, shape, or form. So the Bible gives no constitutional, when I say constitutional, the Bible gives no basis on which to stand on to say that, we're going to push Christian nationalism. I would have liked to see that be in the film.
Thank you. Really important point. I hope we dive into that as well. Scott, you're up, and Daryl, you'll be our last one for this question.
Okay, yeah, this will be quick. Speaking of definitions, though, it seems like the primary culprits for Christian nationalism were white evangelicals, and I think it's important to acknowledge that the word evangelical, apparently the definition of that is also changed. I like the dictionary definition, which says believe in, centered around Jesus, believe in the need for salvation, believe in the authority of Scripture. But apparently, like the New York Times just did an article that says the Republican Party is appealing to, or Donald Trump's appealing to a new kind of evangelical or something like that. So the point is that it's almost like an exit poll category now. And a lot of these people who are calling themselves evangelicals don't even go to church at all, like even once a year, not even Christmas. So that's not those are not my people in terms of like people that I recognize as evangelical. And when I hear them online, I don't recognize them. I don't understand where they're coming from, and yet they're calling themselves evangelical. So I think that's, if we're going to say evangelicals are responsible for, you know, this supposed surge of Christian nationalism, then I think we need to talk about what's going on there too. So.
Yeah, that's very insightful. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Daryl, and actually Susan, you'll be our last one now, and then we really are going to move on to the next question after that.
Sure. Well, thanks for putting this on. So first off, I'm born and raised United Methodist, but I do attend an evangelical church. And I saw the article that was just referred to, I think from the Wall Street Journal, talking about the fact that a lot of these evangelicals now don't even attend church. And therein lay the problem, is the fact that, you know, as someone else just mentioned, in terms of when you're looking at it from the constitutional standpoint, in terms of separation of church and state, that's one thing. But then when you're looking back at the Bible, it is very explicitly clear in regards to what Christians can, in a sense, involve themselves, you know, and choose whoever side they want to be on from that perspective. But what happens with when they start, first off, the key word white Christian nationalism infers that there's only one race that is quote unquote Christian, and you follow along with what they are going to be proposing. And so when you start looking back at the history of the development of this country, they did talk a little bit in the film about the doctrine of discovery, which was what Christopher Columbus brought back the second time he came here. And he got basically the approval from the Pope of Spain to come back and say, hey, if they're not Christians already in that particular section of the world, then if they are Christians, then you work with them. But if they're not Christians, you have every right to take, destroy, kill anybody in sight. And when you start thinking about then, you know, looking at all, you know, why Native Americans, you know, are now starting, you know, have been talking about all along Christopher Columbus and what took place. Then when you go back to slavery and this whole thing of, they used to call it here, manifest destiny, that it was their right to go in and again, take land, kill if you have to, and move people out because God promised it to us. And so
right.
what I can say—
Daryl, I'm going to interrupt you. I'll give you 20 more seconds to wrap up for the next person. Go ahead,
okay.
Daryl. Yeah.
So all I was—
Now you're on mute.
I'm sorry. So
yeah,
what
go
I
ahead,
was
go ahead.
saying is you have to look at there's a bunch of books that are written on this as far as what happens when you approach things and say you're a Christian, but it becomes a cultist type of ideology. And if you go back, you can see right away, Nazi Germany, that's exactly what happened in Nazi Germany.
Okay,
and how Christians were convinced to go after Jews.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you.
I got a really quick one, Ron, so I can go quick. I just wish the film had talked a little more about the distinction between evangelical and Christian nationalism, because a lot of people I know on the left, and more so on the far left, like the deep blue, conflate the two all the time. And, you know, it's just, and I keep having to explain the difference between them. So I just wish the film had drawn a distinction there.
So Susan,
Thank
very
you.
good, because that question is coming up. If you just hold on. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll ask the next question, which is, what are the factors contributing to the popularity of Christian nationalism in the United States? Keeping it simpler, why is Christian nationalism popular? And Brady Young, you're up.
Yeah, I think my answer to that is actually similar to the last question. And I think it actually has a lot to do with the eschatology and the end times. And, you hear that a lot from, preachers these days, and we're entering the end times and all of these signs are taking place. And so it's just ramping up more and more. And so the motives behind Christian nationalism, they touched on it a little bit in the film about, and we've touched on it a little bit here about like a calling, and you feel like you're doing God's work to bring these things to the forefront of the country. But then, the connections to Israel and the kind of apocalyptic texts and just the eschatology of what we're going to see in the end times, I think is a huge motivator. And that's kind of contributing to why it's becoming so popular and why it's just a hot button thing. It's easy to grab people, the shock factor, the mystery behind what will that look like, and just the preparation for Christian nationalists to make sure that the United States is set apart from whatever destruction may take place and whatever the end times look like. They just want to make sure that our country set up properly, Israel set up properly, and so that the end times all kind of fall into place as they would read it in particularly Revelation or some of the prophetic literature in the Bible.
Okay, thank you for that insightful answer, Brady. And Peter Pearson, you're up next.
Yeah, I would agree with Brady. I think that's a really good point. Thanks for making it. And what I would add is that there's a lot of fear going back to the very dramatic secularization of the culture starting in the 1960s.
You want to expand on that anything at all?
Oh, I'll leave it at that. I'll hear what other people have to say.
Okay. Okay, then Gail W., what do you have to say?
Well, it echoes what Peter just brought up. David P. Gushee in his book, which I put in the chat, says that Christians are tempted to embrace authoritarianism in response to panic over liberalizing cultural trends. And that makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Deborah and Taylor, how about you?
Okay, I think because America is being questioned of whether we're number one. And so I think that is becoming a reclaiming of America being the superior nation of example for the rest of the world, and putting us back on top and putting God as making us exceptional and giving a superiority to our country, to the rest of the world, and maybe making it God's will of however America acts is. I guess I'm really trying to change my words to really have a sympathy for where the other side is coming from to explain it. But I'm yeah.
Well,
okay,
yeah, I think if I can chime in, growing up, right, we had this myth that America was the special place where everyone was free, although we know better, right? And what was taught in school wasn't so much about the genocide of the Indians or really the evils of slavery until the 70s, when we had Roots and other shows that came across. And I think that, growing up white, I can speak for myself. I was really not privy to a lot of the struggles and issues. And I think that in the more recent years, we have become just more aware of everything from global warming. And some of us have been aware, but more and more people are aware of other issues. And I think that challenges this psyche of, I'm important, our country's important, when really we are just one country in many that make up this world. And, we are not more special than that.
Okay, thank you. We got a 2-for-1 there with Deborah and Taylor. Thank you. And now I'm going to call on a few people who have not spoken yet. So Billy Donegan, you're next.
In response to why do we think it's growing, I think one of the things that we really have to pay attention to is the amazing long-range planning and the amazing network and organization that's happening to help Christian nationalism spread. And I guess I will leave it at that, but it is, you know, it's phenomenal, the amount of planning. And again, long range, you know, some of this I think is a carryover from moral majority time. And but looking at what they're doing organization wise and how they're able to network with multiple folks is just surprising. I live in a town that literally has been taken over, you know, for good or ill, depending on what side you're on, by Christian nationalists running school board, running city council, buying businesses, and it's, you know, and holding national things related to, you know, how you're able to gain power, expand power, again, in the name of taking, you know, as that pointed out, it was interesting to me to see that new definition, and I had read it in a book about the commandment, taking the Lord's name in vain. You know, I grew up thinking it just meant don't swear. And, you know, knowing now what we're doing in this national huge wave, you know, in the name of God is, you know, you got to give them credit for being well organized.
Okay, so organization. Thank you, Billy. And now I'm going to go move on to Robert McDuff.
Thank you. I'm a little under the weather, but I'll do my best here. Oh, sorry about that. Saying I will do my best and try to be short. I'm a little under the weather, so forgive me. I'd like to emphasize some of what's already been said. I think part of it stems from the confusion between the term evangelical and Christian nationalism. They're totally different things, but in the media, it gets confused. I think there's definitely a attempt to preserve power and privilege of the group that has that. I think that's human nature, and it's been throughout history, and this is just another example of it. I think part of it's an old one, but social media, right? People get into their silos, and it just reinforces itself, and they get more and more extreme. So I think that's part of it. I think another part of it, and this holds for me, I guess, I think the pendulum, in my opinion, has swung too far in the sense of liberals basically giving me the impression that I shouldn't talk about my Christianity. It has no place in the public arena. It has no place in schools, etc. I actually believe that religion is a key component of society and of history, and that based on what some of the people have said here, you can't really understand history without understanding religion. It's good and it's bad. And I have to preface this by saying, or I should have, I am part of the ELCA. Bishop Eaton is my national bishop. I signed the statement on the democracy or Christians against Christian nationalism. So I'm definitely in that camp. But Jesus was not apolitical. Jesus was coming to present a totally upside down way of thinking.
30 seconds, Robert. 30 seconds. Yeah, go ahead.
And we are called to work for social justice, and you can't work for social justice without working through the government, through the political system. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. I'll take one more. And Bill, you've spoken a few times before. Scott, I think maybe you spoke,
too. Yeah.
has spoke once, and Daryl spoke once. Is that about right? Daryl, you spoke? Scott's spoken
Only
twice.
once.
Okay, Daryl? Okay, then Daryl, why don't you go?
Sorry. Yeah, all I wanted to say is that someone said the key phrase, push for power. And that is one of the big things that this white Christian nationalism movement has really been focused on. And quite frankly, this started, if you think about it, back, Billy Graham used to administer to whether presidents were, Democrat or Republican. But once he went on to glory, Franklin Graham, his son, however, saw the opportunity. And between he and Jerry Falwell and some of the other groups that were, quote unquote, under the banner of evangelical, they have been doing whatever it takes to foster a push for power and deviating from what is actually spelled out in the Bible. So a lot of times when if somebody just mentioned it about the thing of learning, when you're teaching in school, you can't separate history from religion. And that is absolutely right. But the problem is with the banning of books, there's a lot of things that have gone on in this country under the guise of religion. And it had nothing to do with religion. It had everything to do with privilege and power.
Okay.
And so as we're becoming a multicultural country, you're starting to notice when you listen to their mantra, you start hearing certain things coming out, grievances about us becoming a more multicultural society, which means the white portion of the society is actually diminishing because of, quite frankly, not having enough babies, I guess. But so that's my take on it.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. I'm going to move on to the next question now, which is that this film club debated whether this subject should be part of the film club's events, given the risk that it might put off potential participants, and also that Braver Angels doesn't usually talk
Somebody's
about.
typing.
Yeah, can you make sure everybody's muted, leaders? Okay, so we don't usually talk about religion, and we're concerned that this subject might put off potential participants. So the question is, do you think this subject is appropriate for the Braver Angels Film Club to discuss? Bill is right in there every time. Okay, Bill, go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, the answer to your question is yes, I think it is appropriate because I think we can mind our manners. I mean, I've already had somebody contradict me. I said Jesus was apolitical and somebody else said he was not apolitical, he was political. But, that's okay. Braver Angels should discuss stuff like this. I think we can behave ourselves. The one thing that just sort of is itching at me a little bit is I can't tell if there's anybody in this whole group of 73 people who's a Christian nationalist. I would think that by this point, we would have said, are there any Christian nationalists out there who would like to say something? Why are we not doing that?
Well, okay, let's. So are there any Christian nationalists out there who would like to say something? And you may have an opinion about whether this film was appropriate. And I know that Jen and Lori and Scott have their hands raised. Could you raise your hand if you are a Christian nationalist as well? Okay, Scott. Well, because he's kind of iffy. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I already addressed this, but it depends on how it's defined. So I believe that America was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and I could give you a couple examples of what I mean by that, but it's almost never what people think it means. Also, whoever said we need to talk about separation of church and state, it's a really good point. It's there are a couple different views on that. My answer to the last question was, I don't think it is that popular. I don't think Christian nationalism is that popular. I think it's like a boogeyman to freak people out, that there's this movement of people that want to create a theocracy and say, if you're if you're not Christian, you're a second-class citizen in America. I don't know anyone that believes that. And I've been performing and speaking and attending conservative evangelical churches all my life. So yeah, I think this is definitely appropriate to talk about, because part of the premise of Braver Angels is we need to understand each other. We need to, understand opposing viewpoints. I think the conversation, and I'd say usually presented, and certainly more than it was presented, more so than it was presented in the movie. So.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. Jen LaSalle.
Hi, and I here, I'll put my hand down. I had put myself as agnostic when we asked the first question. And I mean, I think this is an important discussion to have because, yes, it involves religion, but, part of being Christian nationalist in theory is that idea of the intersectionality with government. And so for me, it's important to have these conversations because it's really something, as somebody who's not coming from a religious background, that I find perplexing in a country where, in theory, it's based on freedom of religion. And so to have one group say, I only want to have this one religion happen, that seems suppressive. And that idea, somebody said earlier, the idea about, hey, everybody else who's not this will be expected to move along. But what's good about having this conversation is that you see some of the other factors that are driving that. And like for me, even as a non-Christian, I believe that Christ has some super great ideas to include like loving your neighbor. So sometimes when people are Christians and they say they want everybody else gone, I find that perplexing. And so this is a good conversation to have because then I can start hearing some of those other perspectives.
Okay, thank you, Jen. And Lori Cartwright, what do you have to say?
You're
not-
muted, Lori. Muted.
You're still muted, Lori.
She's on her phone, that's why. It's
Okay.
harder.
Well,
It's harder.
while Lori's figuring that out, let's go on to Marilyn. Marilyn.
Okay, thank you. I really feel like Braver Angels is a wonderful forum for discussing this topic. I think the parameters that you set allow for a very civil conversation, and I think it's much easier to hear and understand and leave with something in a different spot than we started. And I also wanted to mention that I have worked as a consultant with Interfaith Philadelphia. And one of the most beautiful things that we've done is talked about the shared values among different faith traditions. And the idea of one religion being superior to every other religion, I find to be very problematic. And I have found that participants who really do some deep dives into spending time with others from different faiths and getting to hear from them, experience things together, often leave feeling very appreciative of each other and not less engaged in their own religion, taking a lot of pride in who they are, but also feeling very good about knowing that the others share so many of the same values and have beautiful traditions that are different that can really be appreciated too. So that would really be the direction I would love to see the country go, is appreciating all faiths.
Okay, amen there, Marilyn. Thank you. Then Lori's going to be the last person, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ron, who looks like he also has an answer, but he'll ask the next question. So Lori, please go ahead.
I'm unmuted now, right?
Yes, you are.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not usually on my phone. So to answer the first question, I do think it's appropriate, and we're kind of having the same discussion as we set up a book club in our state. I live in Utah, about which things are what we want to have as to serve our members here, and what we want, what is okay for discussion, and what we want to bring up. I'm of the feeling that this is a great way for us to practice Braver Angel skills. There isn't a lot, at least for us in our state, there aren't a lot of other opportunities to do this together. And so I think anything like this where we can come together and practice those skills and listen to each other is really, really important. At least here in our state, that's a really important thing. One other thing I want to say is, being from Utah, I have grown up Mormon, and within our Mormon scriptures called the Book of Mormon, definitely a Christian nationalist vibe, I would say, in kind of American exceptionalism. I don't know if you're linking that with Christian nationalism or not, but there's definitely the idea taught in there that the United States was ordained by God for people to come, for a new religion, specifically the Mormon religion, to be set up and to usher in the second coming of Christ. So there is a real strong vibe of that in our religion. People try and get away from that and try and talk around it, but it's definitely an issue. And there are people within the faith that I would, and leaders that I would very much consider to be Christian nationalists along these lines. And that, to me, became very evident in the last election or surrounding January 6th, COVID, things like that. So anyway, just wanted to let you know that as well.
Well, that's very interesting, Lori. Thank you. And now, Rob, over to you.
Before I give this next question, I just wanted to add the Declaration of Independence. Now, if you're familiar with the Declaration of Independence, it says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, okay? That they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, the reason why I say this, because a lot of times we confuse that with being founded on as a Christian nation. No, the founders were deists, Christians, atheists. They were from all walks of life. What they wanted to do is not have Christianity or one other religion to rule this country. So keep that in mind when we continue on this path of trying to understand what this Christian nationalism is. That's very important. And look at the Constitution, because it's unconstitutional, and I'll repeat that, to go to say that we want a Christian nation, okay? Because we have too many religions. We have too many people that are atheists within the country. And that would, I think, would destroy this great country. Anyway, that's my saying. The question, how would you define evangelical Christian versus a Christian nationalist? That's the first part of it. I don't know if you want me to go ahead and do the follow-up part. As a follow-up, how does the confusion between the perception of an evangelical Christian and a Christian nationalist impact bipartisan political cooperation? So there's a mouthful there. If you can remember, how would you define an evangelical Christian and a Christian nationalist? Anyway, I was hoping the pastor would come chime in. Go ahead, Pastor Peters.
Thanks so much, Ron. I was trained in an evangelical seminary in England in the mid-1970s. And the Word had a very specific doctrinal set of values, which have been articulated by someone else. I think Scott articulated those very well. And I've watched, I was very zealous for that term, to label myself a conservative evangelical. I've watched in the last 40 years that term has changed. It was confused with evangelistic. So it'd be often substituted when someone would say, oh, Billy Graham is an evangelist. They might say Billy Graham is an evangelical. So the word, and I remember when it showed up in the newspapers and in media, it felt like, from my perspective, a more kind of hip way of talking about this group of Christians who talk about being saved and coming to Jesus.
Mhm.
And so I think there was a cultural misappropriation of the term. And as that someone noted that article in the New York Times just recently, there has been a massive appropriation of the term to include a lot of conservative Christian perspectives. And so I would love to see us ditch the term, start with something else. But I think that what the media is saying today is probably pretty accurate, that there is this large segment of the American public that would consider themselves conservative Christians, and they might use the term evangelical, and would also consider that they are Christian nationalists, in that they want to hold on to conservative Christian values that they grew up with. And I'll stop there and let other people speak. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. How about Susan? But I saw Taylor's hand up too, but was that a mistake, Taylor?
And Brady's up too. Yeah, I just, in my mind, I just think in simple terms, evangelical is about spreading the good word, and Christian nationalism is about forcing the word. That's just the way I think of it.
That's interesting. Okay, I'll go with Brady. I didn't see, Brady, you have all that psychedelic stuff in the background. I didn't see your hand. Okay, go ahead, Brady.
It's just a Denver Nuggets flag from the 80s, but right on. So yeah, Susan, I think we're kind of tracking on the same line. I would say an evangelical Christian is somebody that's they want to share the good news, and the good news is that every human is born into sin, and that flawed nature needs redemption, and that redemption only comes through Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is both fully man and fully God, and sending that message into the world. This is who Jesus is, and this is how he can save someone out of their sinful nature. That's the compartment of the evangelical Christian. The Christian nationalist, then I kind of like this phrase we've been using of this push for power. It takes these ideas that many evangelical Christians have, but then blends it with the political nature, if you will, and that push to make sure that the country itself is not only holds those values as people, but is the government itself runs the country with those ways. And then kind of back to my earlier point, that's also that the country is set up to be in a good position for that end times kind of theology there.
Thank you, Brady.
So very, very different, and I appreciate the nuance that we're having of the two different ways of thinking about the different groups.
Thank you. We'll go with Taylor, then finish up with Scott on this question. How about that? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the last person who spoke and the reminder of the good news. I just kind of adding on to what I said before, we're going through a change in this country where previously for perhaps this, what was a majority of white men, right? We are now having to mix and mingle with different ideas and awarenesses. And that is a maturing, a change. This is a change. And we can show mercy and kindness to our brothers who are sisters who are struggling with the acceptance of a larger
diversity.
Yeah, larger diversity than they have been brought up to, you know, that they're just one in many, as opposed to the one or the, you know, just it's, you know, it's hard to change. Society is going through a big change. We have a lot of voices coming up. We have the threat of global warming, and you know, we're going through it. And
So Deborah, let me ask you that. As far as the question goes, what is the difference between the two groups in that narrative you just laid out?
Evangelical versus nationalism.
Oh, okay. Back to that. The difference is one is closer to the Bible and wants to share the good news. And the other one, as the last person spoke, is more about reaching for power in a fearful state of losing one's identity.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Deb. Well, I'll go with Belinda, then I'll come back with Scott since Belinda hadn't spoken yet. Okay, Scott, is that okay? Okay, go ahead, Belinda.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to point out a comment I had posted in the chat. After watching the film, I actually Googled for definitions of evangelicals, and I came across the website of the National Association of Evangelicals, and they have a definition that the word is defined by theological convictions and distinctions, conversion, a focus on the Bible, a focus on Christ, and activism, which they define as the expression and demonstration of the gospel in missionary and social reform efforts. And I posted the site for that. And I agree with what Deborah just said about the difference. And I think too often in the media, they characterize Christian nationalists, they conflate the two and you know, just seem to present the idea that all evangelicals are Christian nationalists, when some people would say that Christian nationalism is a distortion of the evangelical faith. And I'm a Baptist, a lot of Baptists are evangelicals, and a lot of even Baptists have forgotten the roots of the Baptist denomination that were really grounded in religious freedom, because Baptists were persecuted upon their founding in England, and Baptist ministers were jailed. And then when they came to the US, the Church of England was the official church in the US, and Baptists and everybody else actually had to pay a tax to support
20 seconds, Belinda.
the Anglicans. And they could be charged if they didn't attend the Anglican church. And Baptists were actually instrumental in lobbying James Madison to have freedom of religion in the First Amendment. And they did
Thank
not
you.
believe in a religious test for office.
Thank you. Thank you, Belinda. We'll finish up with Scott. Please make it brief, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I pulled up the dictionary definition of evangelical. I was trying to go off my memory before. I think it's great. Belonging to or designating the Christian churches that emphasize the teachings and authority of the scriptures, especially the New Testament, in opposition to the institutional authority of the church itself. And that stress as paramount the tenet that salvation is achieved by personal conversion to faith in the atonement of Christ. So the reason I would call myself an evangelical rather than a Christian, because Christian is such a broad term and it's almost meaningless. This is actually descriptive, and you kind of get a sense of what I believe if I say evangelical, or at least you're used to. But what I think the difference is, you know, the Bible talks about every tongue, every tribe, every nation voluntarily coming to Jesus or accepting Jesus as their creator. The invitation's for everyone. So you may not believe this, of course, but that's what the Bible talks about, is this: God is the creator of everyone, every nation, every tribe, every tongue. Whereas Christian nationalism, it's like an us versus them thing, and like somehow white Christians have supremacy, or we don't want immigrants in the country. It's like none of that's biblical. None of it makes sense to my mind, from an evangelical perspective.
Thank you, Scott.
So,
thank you.
Division.
Yeah.
Versus.
Yeah. So I'll move on to the next question. Is that okay, leaders? Okay. All right. Number 6 is, do you think Christian nationalism aligns with or diverges from the principles that your political party traditionally upholds? Do you think it, and are the common ground values that both Republicans and Democrats can identify, share within the context. So that first part of it wants to know, who does it align with? The Republican Party or the Democratic Party? And it was just, anyway, yeah. Well, we got some repeaters here if nobody else's names are up. Okay, we'll go with the Deborah and Taylor. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Taylor, and unfortunately, I believe that many of the Christian nationalist ideas could be seen in the Republican Party. I speak of Kissinger, I speak of Nixon, I speak of, oh man, when like the war on drugs was really a war on Black Americans. And I look at our you know, our prison system. I think in light of recent information that's come forth, that was said at the time in closed rooms in the White House, we can see that this Christian nationalist underlay, this underpinning has been present for a long time. And that's just my view.
And I'd like to add that I feel like it works hand in hand with Republican conservative, because it is about bringing back and conserving what has been the traditions. And yeah, and actually in a sadness, I think that progressive is moving ahead and is disregarding Christianity. And so I'm a Christian, and I do feel like Democrat and progressive is disregarding that as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me ask this question. This has to do with historical. What about when the Democrats sort of were Dixiecrats? And we look at history. What do you think? Would it have fit with that narrative as well? Or, I mean, I'm just throwing that out historically.
Well, I think that's a really good point. I think Dixiecrats, you know, I think the Republican Party kind of pushed this idea that, I mean, look, we came from, this country was born during slavery. I mean, that's all that needs to be said. We are coming away from that, and it is hard on some people and some people's ideology, because our country was birthed with things that supported that, and those supporting structures are falling away, and it is scary to those people who, you know, I don't need to. It's already, we know all this.
I know what you mean, Taylor. Let me go. Who can I go with next? Shucks. We haven't heard from you, Bill. Go ahead, Bill. You're muted, Bill.
You sure? I mean, you have heard from me. I'd be happy to.
Yeah,
talk.
everybody else we've heard, except for Benjamin. Oh, we heard from Benjamin too. So anyway,
you know,
so go ahead, Bill.
As long as I've started, I'll just keep going. I want to stay away from history and, you know, Dixiecrats and what happened in 1776. I just confine myself to the year 2024. And I would say the answer to that question is, let me stay away from the terms Republicans and Democrats. Because, you know, when you say Republican, what do you mean? Do you mean, you know, an old style Republican or a new style Republican? So I want to stay away from those words. And lean more towards the words conservative and progressive, as someone else has already done.
All right.
And, you know, by definition, conservative is somebody who wants to conserve. And the Bible was written 2,000 years ago. Jesus walked the earth 2,000 years ago. Moses and the Jews set down the Judeo-Christian foundations more than 3,000 years ago. So the conservatives would like to conserve what was set down for us years and years and years ago, as opposed to progressives whose thought process is let us progress. And, you know, and so when it comes to Christian nationalism, I mean, they're going to cleave much more closely to conservatives than they are to progressives, because they want to conserve the way things are. With the one exception is they don't want to. They also want to venture into new territory, which is imposing their belief system on other people. Well, that's not new territory because they do that in Iran, but it's new territory for us.
Okay, I need some guidance on here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 more hands up. What should we do, leadership here? Move on to the next question. I don't want to cut anyone out. If
I'd like to keep comparing about these differences.
okay, all right then. We'll go with Scott, I guess. Then we'll go to Daryl came out. Well, yeah, go to Scott. Scott, where's Scott at?
Yeah, two more would be enough, right?
Okay, we'll go with Scott.
Well, this is embarrassing. I was typing, so either rephrase the question or go to somebody else.
Well, that made it easy. Now we'll go with Daryl. Mr. Daryl, going once, going twice. How about Belinda? Oh, by default.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
my phone. That was my phone. I couldn't. For some reason, this thing wouldn't go. But go ahead, Belinda.
Okay. I was just going to follow up on Juan's comment about Democrats being Dixiecrats. George Wallace was a Democrat. He was governor of my state when I was born. He was governor of my state when I graduated from college, and 2 additional terms in between. I didn't see anything Christian in him. He was certainly a white supremacist, and Christian nationalists remind me of him. Some of the current things in politics remind me very much of George Wallace, and that is very bad for our country and religion. Just as one example, a week and a half before the 16th Street church bombing that killed 4 young girls, George Wallace, the governor of the state, the highest ranking official in the state, said it was time for some high-class funerals in Birmingham. And a week and a half later, 4 little girls were killed. And so this rhetoric has consequences. There are a lot of people who say words don't matter. George Wallace is a prime example that words of leaders absolutely matter and absolutely sparked violence.
Okay, thank you very much, Belinda. Benjamin, then we'll try to end up with Daryl, because I know you got along with it, Daryl. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, going back to the Dixiecrats and stuff like that, I don't know if anyone remembers the term WASP, White Anglo-Saxons Protestants, and it seems like that has permeated throughout the culture and also worldwide. And I just wanted to also do another film that came out a couple of years ago. I think he won an Oscar for it. Jordan Peele's Get Out. And basically going to that sunken place, just the whole idea, it doesn't matter what political party or faction you're on. It's just the whole idea is just like, what is right and who has power? Basically, what is subjected in the sense of, who's going to be the authority figure.
Thank you, Benjamin. Wise comment. Thank you. Daryl.
Yeah, so I think first off, it's interesting. We're talking all the way back to history with Dixiecrats and what have you.
My apologies.
No. And here's the reason. Because you do realize, when they talk about the Southern strategy, everything flipped. And a lot of people will try to, argue and say, no, that was a theory and what have you. No, that was Nixon and those guys. And to prove it, all you have to do is ask white supremacists, what side do they have a tendency to align with? And that's all I got to say about that part. But the key thing is, I agree, a lot of times that they're, you think they're misappropriating evangelical with white Christian nationalism, but the problem is, and it's not the media, you have to look at individuals who are the heads of a lot of these top evangelical organizations. And I go back to, Franklin Graham. Jerry Falwell started that process of aligning themselves politically, and then it just continued from that standpoint. The last thing I just want to say is one of the things that the bottom line for this whole thing is, in order to get what you want from a power standpoint, you have to set up some type of division between people. And the easiest type of division that we seem to have in this country is between race. And based on that, even if you are in the same boat with everybody else and all of the wealth is being translated and pushed up to the top 1% of the people that don't involve you, you'll still align with them and even shout to the rooftops, you know, that, oh, big businesses, for instance, you know, we're doing them wrong, but they don't have any of us in mind to begin with. And so empathy is really
10
just gone
seconds,
by the
Daryl.
wayside. Yeah.
10 seconds. There you go.
Yeah, it's just gone. Empathy has gone by the wayside. And again, when you're aligning politically and you're completely diverging yourself from the Bible, there's a problem.
Thank you,
You
Daryl.
can't put Christian in any title that you say you are.
All right. Now, John, hold on. You can be for the next question from Ivan. Don't put your hand down. And if you want to talk about what we just did, you can go ahead. Go ahead. Ivan's up with the next question.
All right. Thanks, Ron.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are running short of time. So this is the next question, and it's about elected officials who explicitly promote Christian viewpoints when they talk about public policy. Are they violating the First Amendment, which is about separating church and state? And are they then violating their oath of office? Or is that action just an example of how personal values inform one's behavior? What do you think? John, you want to tackle that one? What do you think about elected officials who argue their public policy viewpoint on Christian viewpoints?
Yeah, actually I would. And it kind of ties in with the last question too. I would be what you guys would consider a progressive. And I've always been fascinated when people talk about how, well, they're not accepted by progressives or anybody else because of their religion. Now, I can only speak for myself. I don't care what religion a person is. And to me, I see all religions, regardless of what they are, as having the same basic precepts. They'll have kind of the same, you're supposed to be honest, you're supposed to be good, you're supposed to treat people well. I used to be a teacher, and I've always been fascinated when people go and say, like, well, how can you educate children and have religion in the schools? You have to have religion to teach basic things like honesty and trust and, you know, integrity. It's like, no, you don't. You know, it's kind of like not being part of a religion doesn't automatically mean somebody all of a sudden to just like they have no guidance, no reference of what's good or evil. That's just not true. So I've just always thought that was fascinating. And to me, when you have a politician talking about, you know, you have to have this policy because it's a religious policy, it's a Christian policy, that's what founded our country. No, you know, it's kind of what the people who founded our country, as earlier was said, most of them were Christians, but it's only a Christian country simply because most of the people that made it were Christian. In Israel, you can call it a Jewish country because most people who founded it were Jewish. In Iran, most of the people who founded it were Muslim. So, you know, it's kind of like, that doesn't mean anything. You know, saying that a government policy comes from a religion, that's simply not the case. Yeah,
all right.
If I can just a little bit longer, I used to think of religions as a problem. For example, I used to see that in Ireland, you had the Catholics against the Protestants. In Israel right now, and always, you've had the Jews against the Palestinians or the Muslims, and some of them are actually Christians. So, and as I thought about it, I used to be a history teacher. All of a sudden I realized in Ireland, it's not Protestants against Catholics. It's a group of people from England who happen to be Protestant, went over to Ireland and took over a bunch of their land from a group of people who happen to be Catholic. So the religious part, that's incidental. In Israel, you have a group of Palestinians who are Christian and Muslim. Then you have a group of Jewish people came in who took the land of the people who were Christian and Muslim. So it has nothing to do with Jews and Muslims and Christians. It has to do with one group of people who happen to be one religion taking the land of another group of people who happen to be another religion. So it's kind of like religion is used in a lot of ways, I think, in a negative way, and it shouldn't be. Religion itself is not negative. It can be a very positive thing. It depends on how it's used. I've seen it used in very positive, wonderful ways. It helps people. And it also seen it in very negative ways. It's hurt people. So it's not religion. It's the way people are using it.
All right.
If they some not religious and there's, they can't be good or positive or.
I'm just going to jump in, John, because that was over 3 minutes and we try to do people at 2 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. So I want to just throw out there that I just to, provide another point to what you said, John. I do think there's a big difference between a country being founded under the auspices of a religion and run with that religious text as a guiding document. That was not the US. So I don't think you can compare Israel, Iran, and the US. That's one point. Another point, and this is just my own thing, is I think that if anyone can answer yes to the first part of Ivan's question and comparing it to Amendment 1, which I posted, and I'm going to reread Ivan's question, the first part of Ivan's question. What do you think of elected officials explicitly promoting Christian viewpoints and public policy, basing policy on their views? If you're completely not yes or no question. If you're completely fine with that, then we have to also all be fine with basing public policy on Hindu views, basing them on pagan views, basing them on Jewish views, basing them on Buddhist views, basing them on Muslim views. And I just want to be very clear, because we do have equality of religion, then I, as a Jewish woman, can run for Congress and say, you know what, I'm going to use, rabbinic law from the 3rd century, and I'm going to derive political policy from rabbinic law from the 3rd century. So just keep in mind that if you're in power and you use that power in a certain way, but you have equality of religion, you have to be 100% okay with any minority religious person being in power and basing their religious policy on their religious text as well. That's all I have to say.
Oh, thanks, Molly. Scott, I see your hand up, but if it's okay with you, I want to ask folks that haven't spoken so much. Okay, thanks. Jen.
So, just to sort of riff off of what Molly was saying, I mean, I think for me, again, as somebody who is not aligned specifically with any one religion, I think there are some wonderful things about the kind of values that different religions generate. So, it depends on the way in which it's used by that politician. I think a lot of people of faith bring their values to politics, and part of that is about being of service, which oftentimes is something that's encouraged in religion. I think the distinction comes in a country like the US, where in theory there is separation of church and state, when, as Molly was saying, like suddenly one group tries to dominate the conversation and subjugate the rest of the population, or is making moves to do that. So I think in that case, and the other interesting thing is I've heard in different places recently where people say, oh no, separation of church and state means the state doesn't doesn't interfere with the religion. It's not about protecting the government, it's about protecting the religion. And so, if you look at it that way, then that's a little different. But yeah, personally, myself, I'm open to it as long as it's not forced upon me, or there's no plans to legally do that.
All right. Let me give somebody else a chance. Chris Patton.
Thanks. I'm Christian. I believe when we come into public service, you bring all of yourself. And so you're going to bring whatever faith values you do or don't have. And I think that's great. But I had an experience. I recently relocated. I lived in Texas for 7 years. And one of my representatives, I was surprised to get in my email shortly after Easter, a message, I guess the global blast from his office saying, Christ is risen. Happy Easter. And at Christmas, I got one very pointedly saying, Merry Christmas. And I was uncomfortable. I thought, maybe I've written to him in a way, because I had written to him because I had differing opinions about what he was doing. I may have said somewhere along the line or indicated I was Christian, and so he knew that, but there's a really good chance he didn't know. And I thought, how would this be? This man is supposed to represent me. How would this be if I were agnostic or Jewish or Muslim, to get this very blatantly Christian thing coming from an elected representative out of his official account? So I hadn't thought about it before because none of my representatives ever in decades had done something like that. But when it comes down to sending things that are kind of signals to who you perceive your base to be, it feels to me like it crosses the line. That's not what I expect to come out of an official account. There were some similar things in some of his newsletters that went out as well. And to me, that was not just him bringing his whole self and his faith, whatever that might be, to his position. That was virtue signaling, so to speak, to people he thought were his supporters. Or the opposite, if I hadn't agreed with it. Just let me know. I mean, if I had received that and I were, not Christian, I would think, this is my representative. How much can I trust him?
Yeah, good point. If it's okay, I want to get Beatty and Annette and close out on this question. Beatty, how about you? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I think Christian is used with politicians as a buzzword. That it's a word they use to do base. If you just rule as a Christian, it's got to be good, because it's the same as if you rule as a good Muslim or a Hindu or a Jew, as far as loving your neighbor and being kind. That's across the board. So if you make laws that will help people and look out for people, then you don't have to say you're Christian. You are a Christian, or you could be anything else. But I think today it just fries me when people say they're Christian and they act completely opposite from following Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ led a life of helping people, being kind, being nice, looking out, was not a power broker. And yet people that are doing all the wrong things are saying they're Christians, and it really makes me sick to my stomach. And this is my first time, so I don't know if I should be as excited about saying this as I am. Am I supposed to be very calm and non-judgmental? But I'm telling you, I just think it makes me just fry when people use the Bible and all this stuff in politics. Yes, you can live it and you can lead it, but you don't have to name it. People will know if you're leading the right way.
Right. Got it. Annette. And we'll have Anne Fenstermacher be the closeout on this question. Annette.
Thank you. Two things really quickly. One is I live in a county in Michigan, in West Michigan, where over 25 years ago, we started collectively in our town, we started a Jewish, Christian, Muslim dialogue with leaders, with the worship leaders in our community. And it is still going on to this day. In fact, it has now been taken over by one of the universities in our area. And we're very proud of that. Another county near us recently, last year, put into power a group of people who sounded like they were going to represent everyone. And when they got into power, they used their Christian beliefs. I'm a Christian, I'm a ELCA Lutheran. They used their Christian beliefs to ban books, to fire people that were good leaders because they didn't go along with their ideas. They have run with closed meetings. They have, people are up in arms. And obviously those of us in neighboring counties are a little nervous about the fact that that kind of supposed Christian political group got in, and they're just using their Christianity for power.
Right. Got it. And so
it's like they're
next,
trying to protect
please.
God.
Yeah.
I think this question for me has been talking about moral compass.
And I think we all want our elected officials to exhibit and hang on to their moral compass. And I think where that comes from is their own personal values and religion. So it's a little interesting how you can slip off of the neutral line and all of a sudden be offensive if you start exhibiting more specific ideology. But moral compass is not something that we want to discourage. We definitely want to hang on to that.
Right. Good point. Well, I'm going to just close out my section because I want to give Stephanie a chance to at least talk a little bit. So Stephanie, please jump in here.
Okie dokie. I'll take the next question. Did you ask that one about the Christian nationalism affected your church or family?
No, but you can
gonna
ask
skip-
whatever question you want, the one assigned to you or the one I was
Okay,
supposed to.
I'll go ahead with 10. So it says, some
Okay.
people think that the rise of Christian nationalism is a response against multiculturalism in America. How do you feel about the census projections that the US will become a minority white nation in 2045? Will this be good, bad, or neutral for the country? I don't see any hands up yet. Okay, Belinda, why don't you go ahead? And then
Yes, I've actually read some things along this line that Pew Research has written, and it cites commentators who have said that one of the reasons for the decline in Christianity is people, it's like what Dee was saying, that people, very visible people, it could be journalists, it could be ministers, it could be politicians who tout that they're Christian, but they're not acting in that way at all. And so people who aren't in the church say, well, if that's what a Christian is, I don't want to be that. Or maybe if they're in their church, that may unfortunately persuade them to leave. So I'm concerned about the reasons for the decline in Christianity.
Thanks, Belinda. Joan, how about you?
I think someone alluded to that earlier, that the multiculturalism has people afraid of losing their privilege and power. And I think the census projection is definitely having an effect on that. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Daryl?
All I have to say on that is, and I mentioned that before, is I would say it's great for the country, but it's perceived as an implicit threat to those who see themselves supposedly being at the top of the food chain, so to speak. And I think you mentioned something about, as far as the church is concerned, I am in an evangelical church where I can honestly tell you, and then also the other part of that, the multicultural part, is also now things coming out regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, the implicit racism in various systems throughout the country and what have you, and that now being brought into the light. Those same individuals do not like that. And they actually don't even empathize with it. They just look past it and say, no, you don't know what you're talking about, or it's not true. So the problem is you have pastors in these congregations that if they dare bring out the fact of, talking about, this multiculturalism and, love thy neighbor, and talk about actual things that go on a day-to-day basis, they're thrown out of their congregations. So when they're speaking out against white Christian nationalism, you can go through YouTube or go through, just Google it. You will find these pastors are cast out because their congregations do not want to hear it. And the church that I'm with, I would say 75% of the people there are exactly like that. And the other 25%, we're just looking at them and we're talking, you know, amongst ourselves and just saying, see, this is what we're talking about. And, you know, my mother has told me I should leave, but I want to be amongst those so that I can have conversations with them so that at least they can look at me and say, even though unfortunately they'll say, well, you're different. And I'm like, no, I'm not different. I'm a Christian. And if I say I'm a Christian, you should be able to see that in the fruit that I bear and how I treat people. And if you are doing something that's completely opposite, then you need to, you know, self-identify and check yourself on, are you really Christian or are you just following along like a sheep to gain power?
Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah.
We'll
I'm
stop
gonna
on
go to
that
Chris.
fruit.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Chris. I'm going to add a little twist on this question is that if, say that there was a huge swell of Christian nationalism by people of color, then, you know, how does that change the whole dynamic? So, Chris, why don't you go ahead and say what you wanted to say?
Okay, on that second thing that you just changed that I haven't thought about.
Either one.
To me, the changing demographics are just natural. It's part of what happens. This country has never reacted well to changes in immigration patterns or nationality patterns. I mean, historically, you know, the Italians were not welcome. The Irish were not welcome. People of color don't blend in because they're people of color if you're thinking largely white. So it's going to rattle people. It's going to be a problem. For me, I think of it as part of the challenge of living into the origins of this country, of being not an innately, you know, French or German or national culture to begin with, but of a place, you know, e pluribus unum, of welcoming many people. And I think it's something that is a perpetual challenge of how do we welcome, how do we incorporate, how do we live as things change? So I'm not afraid of it. I welcome it. I think it's going to be really interesting, but I also think it's going to pose big challenges. And historically, that does not lead in a good direction here, at least initially.
Okay, Molly?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll be brief here. I think that it's not really about what any individual, to me, think. I think it's not what any individual thinks. It's about how the country is preparing for this in a way that is going to lessen the fear and lessen the idea that power always has to be a zero-sum game. I'm someone who has always believed strongly that more people not like me gaining power is actually to my benefit and not to my detriment. And I want to figure out, like, why did I think that? Why have I thought that always? And how can we teach that to people around the nation that they don't have to be afraid? There's nothing to fear when people who don't look like you and don't sound like you and don't pray like you are in power. And I pray to God that people will get over this idea, but I don't think they're just going to get over it. I actually think there has to be an active effort to work with Christian nationals directly. This is why, like, I'll talk to anyone. Like, I've talked to people who say horrible things about Jews, and I'll be like, okay, let's talk right now. And we do. And they actually usually back off of things. And it takes a really serious conversation. And I don't know how to do this at scale, but I really do believe that we can't assume it's a good or a bad or a neutral. It's about what small groups, whether it's like us or national curricula or a national political effort, is going to do to bring people together. I have specific ideas in my head, but we're running out of time, so I won't share them.
Okay. Velma, I'd like to go to you. I don't think that you've spoken up tonight.
Hello.
Hi, Velma.
Sorry for the noise background. I'm at Home Depot. I wanted to comment on the multiculturalism issue. And I think part of the problems that we're facing as a country is that we're using the same terms but mean different things. And I think a lot of people that have an issue with multiculturalism is not necessarily the different cultures like food, way of dressing, etc. But someone mentioned the Latin phrase out of many one. I think it's the fact that when people are coming out of the many, we're not forming a one. We're still being a many. So we don't have one set of values that we're all sort of like looking towards. Everyone comes with their own values, and then it's difficult to see eye to eye and live as one if we don't have shared values. So I think that there are values with the small v, small letter v, and there are values with the capital letter V. And we should all be unequivocal about the capital V capital V value.
I like
And I
that.
think that's the issue with multiculturalism. Not the small v, but the big V.
Okay, great. Deborah and Taylor, what would you like to say on this?
Hi, Velma. It's Deborah and Taylor. We're friends.
Hi, Deborah.
Okay.
Hi, Taylor.
Hey. Okay, so I think that Christianity and whatever God's intent and will would be better when the culture of Christianity is at a minority. And I said this to Molly earlier, that I think that it's more authentic when it's not corrupted by power. And so as soon as that culture or movement or way of thinking and theory and philosophy and theology, I think it becomes quickly corrupted when it, and our history has been Christianity with a lot of it at its worst when it was in power. And I think we will have a chance of revitalizing and redeeming the bad name of Christianity if it is in the minority. But we've got a long way to go for that, I think, because of all of the past mistakes. And if your other question, if the people of color or a minority group now has become to take on Christianity as a culture, then I would be worried that they will get if they are become a majority, that they will get swayed into the power as well, and power and control. But if everything is done in love and respect and compassion, then I'm positive for the future.
Okay, great. That's all that we can do there. Ron is gonna wrap up here. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, man, great conversation tonight. And what I hope is, as we end tonight, that we all go out, and I challenge you to go out and get more information about this topic we just discussed. In the mode of Braver Angels, right now, we're kind of in a divided nation. And I just want to remind you of Braver Angels why. We're based on giving people a place where they can speak their perspectives, as long as it's civil. And tonight, I am very proud to say that that came true loud and clear today. Wow, it was excellent. We may not have got all our questions answered, but hopefully it gives you a path, a journey to go out and discover and look for more answers. And I am proud to say, with the team and everyone that are on this line that are members, that, man, what a wonderful place where we can go to our next how and our what through the film club, or through a workshop, or anything. We find all types of tools in Braver Angels. For those who are new to Braver Angels, I invite you to go to braverangels.org and be part of a movement, because we need you. We need your voice. We need your friends. We need your buddies. We need even your enemies that don't even want to talk to you because you may be a progressive or conservative. Because that's the only way we can make change. Now soak on that and marinate on that, what I'm trying to tell you, because that's the only way we're going to make change. Now, changing the avenue today, the next movie is one movie that I recommend. The next film we'll be discussing is called American Creed. It stands as a beacon of unity. This powerful documentary explores the essence of American identity. It emphasizes common threads that binds us from fundamental principles like equal opportunity, diversity, the pursuit of happiness. These values unite us all by showcasing diverse perspectives. The film encourages respectful dialogue, fostering understanding, empathy. American Creed, remember that. It calls us to rise for America, especially in the upcoming 2024 election. Let us unite under that banner of being American, what it means to be an American, both conservative and progressive, and not be divided by all the rhetoric and the propaganda that goes on both sides. My name is Ron McFarland, better known as Sugar Bear, and I love every last one of them. And make sure you come back and say hi. And I will end, unless Donna has something else to say.
No, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.